Hi, I'm Megan. Welcome to today's live reading of The Moon That Fell from Heaven by N.L. Holmes, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Join me. Chapter 1. Ehli-nikkalu told herself she had many reasons to be proud and happy. She was a princess, in fact, the eldest princess, the great lady, a mighty of Hatti land. As of 7 years ago, she had been the king's wife of the rich little maritime state of Ugarit, her father's vassal. She was 35 years old and healthy, and yet, frankly, she was miserable. Every time she thought about her lot, she wanted to gnash her teeth. Even though she had been educated to sit on the throne beside her husband and help him formulate policies, she had been reduced to ceremonial roles. That's what a Hittite princess is trained to do, be a co-ruler. Who knew if she might not find herself Tawana or whatever the local equivalent was in the country where she married. And maybe someday she, Ehli-nikkalu, would be elevated to that role in Ugarit. But for now, her mother-in-law held that post, and Sherry was only 3 years older than Ehli-nikkalu herself. It would be a race to see who died first. Sherry would delight in living to a doddering old age just to thwart the ambitions of her son's wife. More galling still, Ehli-nikkulu's husband, King Nikamadu, held her in contempt despite her higher rank. He had left word, sent a slave to tell her, if you please, that he was coming to talk to her, so she had to wait, as if every word from his mouth were a priceless gem. Her face blazoned with fury and humiliation at the thought of him. He complained that I've borne him no children, but how many times has he deigned to grace my bed, the hypocritical snake? She fought down her anger. It wouldn't do to let Nickmadu know how much his disdain ate into her equanimity. Ehli-nikkalu prided herself on her self-control. Her father was famous for never breaking his calm, and she was determined to follow his example. To do otherwise would be to surrender, to submit to her husband's superiority, and he was not superior by all the gods. The door clicked, and she looked up at the panel as it opened quickly, without a "may I" or an "are you decent?" It was the king. They faced each other, and the hostility filled the air like smoke from tinder that had caught, yet not ablaze, but smoldering. She backed against the heavy table, as if to find a defensible position, and lifted her nose slightly. The armor of dignity. The king said nothing, just stood there, with his swaggering good looks, and the corner of his mouth began to curl a caustic smile. His black eyes seemed to penetrate her. He knew exactly what she was thinking, she suspected. It cost her considerable effort not to snarl, "What do you want?" And he, too, had his pose of supremacy to maintain. Ehli-nikkalu found her face growing hotter and hotter. Still biting her tongue, she forced herself to bow, infusing it with as much sarcasm as a humble gesture could bear. "Well, we're in a respectful mood this evening, are we?" Nickmadu asked, approaching. But then he passed by her without a look, as if she didn't exist, and took up a seat in the heavy carved chair. He leaned back and stretched out his legs. "I have something to tell you, and I didn't want anyone else to hear me." "You do me too much honor, my lord." The king smiled coldly. "Your father's emissary is making a visit in a few weeks, and I just wanted to make it clear that you need to be a loyal queen of Uruguay. No telling tales, no whining about how everybody is cruel to you. Understood?" "Perfectly," she said. "I lie." Nick Mandu's eyes narrowed, and he said pointedly, "But no one is cruel to you, you know. It's all a story you've told yourself to feel above us. Have I ever struck you? Are you lacking for clothes or jewels or food? No." He tilted his head as if to consider her from another angle. "Have I ever called you barren in public?" She clenched her fists in the folds of her skirt to better control some menacing gesture she might regret. "It's my understanding that a woman cannot conceive without the intervention of a man, my lord. Since you so rarely can condescend to visit my bed, it isn't much wonder that I haven't given you an heir." Nick Mandu laughed. "I guess I must admit my capacity for self-sacrifice has its limits. Couching with you, my dear, has all the charm of tapping a hedgehog. You are very sharp, and I don't mean your tongue." Ehli-nikkalu expelled a carefully controlled breath through her nose. She knew she wasn't beautiful. She was tall and thin and angular, with a long equine face, very much her father's daughter. It was a measure of her husband's shallowness that he hurled this at her so often, so that he can blame me for his lack of a first-rank son, so that perhaps he could express his contempt for his suzerain, the king, the great king of Haiti, through her own pierced self-confidence. Well, that's neither here nor there. We don't have to love each other. Fortunately, I have another wife if I want children. Pujado has provided me with the heir you seem unable to manage, even if her rank is lower than yours. But then, whose rank isn't lower than yours? The great lady, with her ancient birth and imperial aura. I just want you to understand that if you enter the emissary's presence, you will mind your manners, or there will be consequences. He fixed her with a frigid smile that had in it much menace. I will behave myself with appropriate dignity, she said through clenched teeth. I suppose you will inform him of the disloyal overtures you are making toward misery. Suddenly, his cool facade dropped away, and he sprang to his feet with a snarl. What would you know about my policies? All you do is sow. He seemed to recover his aplomb and said more calmly, You have a reputation for being overzealous, my queen. Who is going to believe yet another of your wild-eyed accusations? Can you offer any evidence? I think not. She smirked at him, letting him wonder what evidence she could offer. His discomfort pleased her. It was so rare that she could ruffle his air of indifference. Nickmadu strode past her to the door, and she noticed a small clay tablet had dropped from his sash onto the cushioned seat of his chair. She dragged her eyes away from it, burying her face in a deep bow. I thank my lord husband for his gracious visit. He shot her a dark look and let himself out the door. Ehli-nikkalu listened until his footsteps died away through the outer chamber and went down the corridor. Then, as much as she wanted to scream and slam something breakable onto the floor, she tiptoed to the chair, heart pounding, and lifted the tablet. It was an Akkadian, she saw, the formal diplomatic language that united every kingdom. Something to or from a foreigner then, not just a billet doux. Although Ehli-nikkalu had a degree of literacy in the simplified script of Ugarit, this was written in a system that required a lifetime to learn and was hence inaccessible to all but a small class of professional scribes. She pressed the tablet to her heart and stared into space, thinking hard. Who can I find to translate it? Who can I trust? Her secretary might or might not be sober at this hour, but at least she felt he was loyal. Padaya, she called to her handmaid, who was spinning in the antechamber. Go find Hadamatu. I need to see him immediately, even if he's drunk. The slave nodded and backed from the room, and Ehli-nikkalu heard her rapid footsteps fade away. The queen turned on her heel and began to pace up and down, her nerves so taut she was almost twitching. What did this letter mean? It might be nothing, or it might be evidence. The evidence she needed to prove her husband was betraying Hattie Land behind everyone's back. Finally, she sank into her chair and spread her hands on her thighs. It seemed an age later that a knock on the door proclaimed the presence of Hadamadu. As she had feared, he was unsteady on his feet, but at least he could stand. The poor fellow, she thought. Nobody else would keep him in their service. And where would a man his age then go to find work? But it made her correspondence trying. My lady wishes to dictate something, the secretary asked in a thick-tongued slur. An attempt at a bow ended in a stumble, and the queen herded him to a chair in front of her big table, setting a damp blank tablet and a stylus before him. He reeked of wine and sweat. He had stopped taking care of himself again, she observed with pity. Read this letter to me, Hadamadu, and keep your voice down. Having squinted at the tablet, then adjusted its distance from his eyes, he started to read aloud words that meant nothing to her. He looked up apologetically. It's in Akkadian. I know. Translate it. Can't you do that? Ehli-nikkulu's flesh seemed to crawl with urgency. She could have shaken the secretary in frustration. In response to your inquiry, he began, stammering through an experienced translator. For all that, we will ready the ships and meet you at Gubala by the end of the month, as we decided before. See to it that the soldiers you promised are here by New Year's Day. The great king's viceroy will be presiding, and that would be an appropriate time to seize the port while everyone is in the courtyard for the ceremonies. Your master will find he has many loyal subjects already in the city, for the king of Hattie's exactions fall heavily on our people, especially the merchants who form our ruling class. Don't correspond again unless necessary. Nikmadu, son of Ibiranu. Hadamadu looked up at her, his red-rimmed eyes bleary. The king's seal is at the end, my lady. The hair stood up on Ehli-nikkulu's neck. This was more than proof. It was damnation. My father must know of this at once, she murmured in a voice trembling with excitement. Nikmadu is getting ready to sell the city of misery. Who else would be strong enough to stand up to us like that? She advanced on her secretary and seized him by the shoulders. You must write a letter to my father and then take it and this vile thing to Rabulu. Rabulu was an emissary, the only man in the chancery she was sure she could trust. He was incorruptible, he among the lords of Ugarit who groveled before the king and his mother. Yes, my lady, Hadamadu said uncertainly, fumbling in his sash for his writing tools. Ehli-nikkulu pushed them toward him over the tabletop. Wine fumes enveloped her. She held her breath until she had withdrawn from his proximity, and it was all she could do not to make a sour expression. Take dictation, Hadamadu. My son and father, I greet you and pray that all is well with you and our land. Alas, all is not well in Ugarit. The king has made concrete overtures to misery to overthrow your rule. She paused. How do I make this pressing? With violence. I attach for you the very letter with which Nikmadu intended to send to his collaborators across the border. May it please you to act swiftly and forcefully, my dear father, your loving daughter, and so forth. Do you have all that? Hadamadu, who seemed to be rubbing out and rewriting quite a lot, his mouth hanging opened, finally looked up from the tablet and replied, Yes, my lady. She thrust at him the tablet the king had left behind, and when he seemed at a loss for what to do with it, she stuffed the 2 patties of clay into his sash. Be careful with this, it is still damp, and you don't want to rub anything off. Take them to Rabulu, you know where he lives. He nodded, struggling for the words to answer. Go then. Go, waste no time. We must have this on the road to Hattie before the king realizes he's lost it. Ehli-nikkulu watched him get unsteadily to his feet, and fear and irritation got the better of her control. By all the gods, Hadamadu, what use are you, you hopeless drunk? After all I've done for you, she cried in exasperation. Then she made her tone milder. Can you walk? Can you perhaps run? This is urgent, urgent. He bowed, one hand steadying himself against the table, and departed with a suspiciously careful tread. As he passed into the darkness of the vestibule, Ehli-nikkulu clutched her head, half mad with frustration. The handmaids whom she had banished to the outer chamber with their spinning looked up curious, but she hastily closed the door in their faces. They were all meddlers, and no doubt spies for Sherieli.